Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. To all my new viewers and subscribers, welcome to the channel. To my returning viewers and subscribers, I just want to say a very big thank you and welcome back to the channel. Thank you all for your support and encouragement. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to make a pencil skirt with bot contour. So these are the measurements needed for your pencil skirt, especially if you're taking your measurement by yourself. So the first thing you want to do is take your full length measurement. That's from where your skirt will start to where your skirt will stop. After that, the next thing you want to take is your first horizontal measurement, which is round your waist. You want to take this round the part where you wear your skirt. It can be below the natural waistline or a bit above the natural waistline. Next thing you want to do is take your hip measurement. As you can see here, to take your hip measurements accurately, what you want to do is when you take it round the fullest part of your hip, you want to take your tape up like I'm doing and then bring it down. Just mimic the way you wear your skirt. That way you're sure you got the exact hip. You take your hip measurement. The next measurement you want to take is your bust span. That's from one bust nipple, or from nipple to nipple, or from bust to bust. You want to take this measurement because it's needed for your dart distance. The next measurement you want to take is from the waist to the hip. Next measurement you need is from the waist to the knee. So you're drafting the pattern. The first thing you want to do is take your vertical measurements and then square out horizontally. My vertical measurements here are my waist to hip line, the waist to the hem line, and the waist to the knee line. So yeah, I've marked it out. You want to mark them out in two places so that you'll be able to get a perfectly straight line when you want to square out horizontally. So that's what I'm doing here basically. So I've gone ahead to square them out and I've labeled them my waistline, hip line, knee line, and my hem line. So starting with the waist circumference, we're going to divide it by 4 and then add our dart with 1.25, and then down to the hip circumference at the level of the hip, you divide it by 4 and subtract 1 inch for the front hip. And then the knee line, you want to subtract whatever you got from your hip, subtract 2 from it, and then at the hem line, whatever you got at your knee line, you want to subtract 0.25 from it. So basically the hip line, at the hip we got 9, that's 40 divided by 4 minus 1 gave us 9. Then when we got down to the knee line, we subtracted 2 from it, which is 7, and then the hem line we subtracted 0.25 from 7, which is 6.75. so I've gone ahead to join these lines. First off, I joined the line at the hem, the knee, and the hip with a straight rule, and then for the waistline to the hip line, I joined it using the curved area of my multi-purpose curve. Now working on the darts, the measurement is using your bust span divided by 2 plus 5.5/8. The reason why I added 5/8 is just so that when we are done dividing the 1.25 into 2 and then closing up our dart, we are going to be getting that original 7/7.5 bust span for our darts. Now after that, I came down 5.5 inches. I squared down 5.5 inches from that point, and then after that I divided my dart allowance, that's the dart width, which is 1.25. I divided it by 2. Of course it gave us 5/8. That's 5 divided by 8. If you want to know how to read your tape rule, please refer back to my previous video on how to accurately read your tape measurement, and you understand how to derive 5/8 on your tape rule. Now after that, the next thing I'm going to be doing is from my center front at the level of the waist, I'm going to come down 1 inch, and then link it to the waistline at the level of my side seam. Now before you do that, you want to close your 2 dart legs. You close it like so. Why? Because I want the 2 ends of the dart to meet at the same point. Now the reason for coming down 1 inch from my waistline is just so I'll be able to eliminate any excess bulge at my waist area when I'm done with my skirt. So that helps to eliminate that bulge and just makes that waist area, you know, sit smoothly on the abdomen. Now going to the back pattern, you want to come in from the edge of your paper 3 inches to get your center back. And the reason why we are coming in 3 inches because of our back vents, and just watch and then you see why the 3 inches is so important. And then I've gone ahead to measure my waistline, hip line, knee line and hemline, just like I did for the front. The next thing I'm going to be doing is to take my darts. Here, that's the same thing we did for the front basically, but the only difference is that I'm going to be coming down 6 inches. Actually, you can actually do a 5.5, a 6.5 or 7 inches. That range is just perfect depending on your preference. So now I'm coming down 6 inches and then I've, you know, squared down horizontally and shared. The next thing I'll do is to share my 1.25 dart width into 2, which of course gave me 5/8. You want to share it on the two sides of this line, and then you join the 2 dart legs to that 6 inches point below, and there you have your back dart set. After this, the next thing I'm going to be going ahead to do is to work on my waist circumference, hip circumference, and then the derivative, I'll use it for my knee circumference and the hem circumference. So yeah, just the same thing we did in front. You want to do your waist. My waist here is 29 divided by 4 plus 1.25, which gave me an 8.5 inches. Remember, all measurements here are in inches, none is in centimeters. So I'm working with the inches measurements. So I've gone ahead to add my 1.25 dart seam allowance, or my dart width. And the next thing I'm going to be doing is, remember here, this measurement is very important. Remember, we subtracted 1 from the front hip. Here we are going to be doing hip circumference, which is 40 divided by 4 plus 1. But instead of adding that 1 to the side seam, we're going to be adding it to the center front. Why? Because we want to get that bum effect at the center back, sorry, so that it fits snugly at the center back. Then down here, you at the knee line, whatever you got at the hip, that's 11, you subtract 2 from it, which is 9. And then at the hem line, whatever you got at the knee line, that's 9, you subtract 0.25 from it, which is 8.75. Just the same thing we did in front, but then this time around we are using the back measurements to get all this. Next thing you want to do is join these 3 points at the hem line, knee line and the hip line together. Then with your French curve, you want to join the point at the waistline to the hip line, like I'm doing in this tutorial. After you might have done that, coming to the center back now, from that point where you got your extra 1 inch, you want to come down 7 inches below, like so, on the original center back line. And then you link these 3 points, that's the center back at the waistline to the bum, this hip line, and then to the new 7 inches line you came down from the hip line, 7 inches point you came down from the hip line. So you want to link it like I'm doing, and then you can see our bum is actually coming out very beautiful. The reason for this bum effect is because we have extra, you know, buttocks at the back area. We don't have buttocks in front, so you just want it to fit like a glove without the extra bulge or the extra fabric below the bum. So yeah, I've gone ahead to add my zipper allowance, which I'm using a 1/2 inch zipper allowance here. The reason why I'm adding my zipper allowance to the pattern paper is because of our back vent. The back vent we are doing in this tutorial is actually the overlap back vent. It's not the normal back vent we are used to, it's the overlap back vent. So because of this, we are going to be adding our zip allowance to the pattern paper. Now remember, we came in 3 inches, and that was because of our back vent. And yes, you can see that 3 inches came into play. It actually came into play. I'm going to go ahead and extend this zipper allowance down to the level of that back vent. So now, before we cut out our pattern piece. There's just one more step I want to add to this tutorial. If you want your skirt to be very fitted, or fits you perfectly, or just if you just like a perfectly fitted pencil skirt, then you want to add this step to it. From the hip line and the knee line, you want to find the midpoint of these two lines, and then you come in by 1 inch. When you've done that, with your French curve, you want to link this new point to the hip line and then link it down to the hem line. This just helps to make your pencil skirt more fitted. But then if your comfort is your cup of tea, then you just want to skip this step because it's usually uncomfortable, can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable, especially for people with fuller and bigger thighs. So please skip this step if you have fuller thighs and you don't want it to be too tight. So yeah, I've gone ahead to cut out my pattern piece on my fabric, giving all the seam allowances needed. So the first thing I did here was to add my extra 1 inch hem allowance for the hem. This will be very important when I'm going to turn it up with the lining. So I've added that 1 inch for the hem, and then for the side seam I added a 1 inch seam allowance for the side seam, and then I came up 2 inches on that vent part because I don't want it too tight. Because of that extra step I took, on a second thought I decided to go up extra 2 inches seam allowance. And then for the waist part, I didn't add any allowance because I'm going to be adding a band. So adding an allowance would increase the length, the original length of my skirt, so I didn't add any allowance. Sorry for the hem. The hem allowance was from the pattern piece. The hem allowance was, I added an extra 1.5 inch. Then for the lining, you want your lining to be 2.5 inches shorter than your fashion fabric. Why? Because by the time you turn up for the fashion fabric to meet, it's going to need a half inch for joining. So yeah, at the dart area you want to go ahead and notch the hip line, the knee line. You just need to notch everything. So when you're joining your front piece to the back piece, all these points, they have to meet. So you also have to notch this hem line as well, because that's where you'll be turning up and that's where your skirt is going to stop. So make sure you notch it. Make sure you notch all these parts on the center, on the side, and also the center back. So yeah, I didn't add any allowance at the waist part because I'm going to be adding a band. The next thing I did here was to iron interfacing on the waist part of the skirt. This just helps the dart. When I'm sewing the dart, it just helps the dart to lay flat better and also to give it strength. I've done that on the main fabric and also on the lining. You also want to iron your interfacing on the vents, on the slit part, that's the vents area of this dress, of the skirt, for the lining and also for the for the fabric. I have a detailed tutorial on how I made a back vent. Please refer to that tutorial for how to sew an overlap back vent. That tutorial is very detailed and loaded. You don't want to miss it. So just refer to that tutorial for this step on how I was able to make the back vent. So yeah, I've gone ahead to sew my dart. I also have a detailed tutorial on how to accurately sew a perfect dart. So I've gone ahead to sew all the darts. So that's the next step you have to do. You sew the darts on the back and the front for both the fabric and the lining, and then the next thing you want to do is join the lining with the right sides facing each other to the fabric. And when you've done that, you want to go ahead and give this a very good press. So for the front piece, you need to join the lining first to the fabric, then you go ahead for the back piece, you go ahead and sew your back vent. So after you might have done that, you give it a good press. It's now time to join the pieces together to shape it. So like I said earlier, you have to make sure that all the notched points are meeting, you go ahead and secure it with a pin, please, so that you don't miss this. It doesn't shift from the original position. So you make sure all the edges are aligned and all the notches are meeting. So you want to join for the fabric the right sides together. You join the fabric first, the your main fabric, before you join your lining. Remember, this is an inner sewing that we are doing. There won't be any rough edges or we are not going to serge any parts. Everything is going to be sewn inside. So you want to sew the lining together and then you sew the fabric together. Now I've gone ahead to do that. As you can see, our skirt is turning out beautiful. The next thing I'm going to be doing here, wow, just look at how the back looks like. So beautiful. Look at the back vent, it's just so beautiful. Then the next thing I'm going to be doing is to go ahead and fix the zipper. This is what the inside looks like without the zipper and the band. So you want to fix the zipper. Yeah, I've gone ahead to fix my zipper. Mind you, when you're fixing your zipper, you want to do it on just the fabric. You just want to do it on the main fabric first. Then you flip your skirt to the wrong part and then sew your lining on the lip of the zipper. Now this is what I did basically. Remember, like I said, we are doing an inside sewing. So first off, you want this, how is this after stitching, this is what it's going to look like. So to stitch it, remember the top part, that's the waist part, is open. To stitch it, I just flipped it to the wrong side like so, with the right side of the lining facing the zip part. So make sure the top part, that's the top part, the waist area, is aligned like this, so that when you sew it, it comes out straight and neat. There won't be any shifting. So you want to sew this to the end, and then you do the same thing for the other part. So here I've gone ahead to do just that. When you turn it, look at how beautiful this piece is looking. Everything is neatly sewn inside, and there is no grounds for serging or finishing your edges. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is the band. Now for my band, I made the width of the band 4 inches, and then the length is the length of my waist, which is 29 plus 1 inch. Now the 1 inch is for seam allowance on both ends of the center back. So I've gone ahead to iron this, folding it in, and then folding my seam allowances at the lip, just to get the crease line for guidance and direction. So the first thing you want to do is sew the one part of the band to the right side of your skirt. That's the front part of your skirt. You're going to sew this. Remember, we have half inch on both sides of the zip. I'm gonna have to trim the excess zip. Before you trim the excess zip, please make sure that the head of your zip is down. You don't want it up. Please don't make that mistake. So when I've done that, you want to fold it like so, and then sew that's half inch seam allowance. You're just going to seal it up, and you do the same thing for the other parts. Then when you've done that, you want to fold the opening, that's the remaining parts, on the wrong side, that's on the lining side. You want to fold it like so, and then with an office pin, with your pins, you want to secure it. This step is very important if you really want to get a clean stitch. So now we are going to sew into this line here. It's called sew into the ditch. We are going to sew into this line. That's the line of that stitch. We don't want, the idea is just so that the seam lines does not show on the right side. So even if it shows on the wrong side, it doesn't it doesn't matter. We just want it to, you know, be looking so neat on the right side that you don't see any stitch. You don't know what stitch is holding it. So I've gone ahead to mimic the stitch I'm going to be making with a pin. So what I did basically was to pin it. So now, as you can see, I'm done stitching, but then you can't see any stitch because I stitched inside that seam. But on the wrong side, that's on the lining part, you can see that there's a stitch there. But then when you flip it to the right side of my skirt, that's where the right side of my skirt, you see that there's no stitch. You can't see any stitch there. So it just comes out beautiful, you know. This skirt looks so professional and very neat. It doesn't look like a homemade skirt. It looks like all these store-bought skirts, and even more beautiful than store-bought skirts. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please do not forget to subscribe to this channel if you really enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for stopping by. The last step here I'm going to do is to fix my hook. I'm going to go ahead and fix the hook and then show you what the finished skirt looks like. The hook is just the finishing. That's where, you know, my zip did not go to it did not reach the edge of my band. So I've gone ahead to fix my hook, which is just going to be the icing on the cake, and then our skirt is ready. Please do not forget to subscribe to this channel if you really enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you did. I hope this tutorial was helpful, especially for my beginners in sewing. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share on all your social media pages. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.